I've had several people reach out to me, and it's just knowing who the true experts are on this and who aren't. Just because someone is a teacher, a principal, whatever, administrator, doesn't mean that they have all of the answers. And so just because someone gives you an answer, don't take that at face value. Keep searching and digging and looking at all of the different options and testing, and you're your child's biggest advocate.
I'm Nicole Holcomb, attorney by day and podcaster by night, a former educator, school counselor, and administrator, and mom to a 9-year-old daughter with dyslexia, who loves all things Harry Potter, Minecraft, and science. A few years ago, she was identified with dyslexia, and our life seemed to turn upside down for a while, quite literally. I created the Dyslexia Mom Life podcast to help you navigate the upside down journey of dyslexia. You got this. If you're wanting to thrive as a mom in this dyslexia journey, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Mother's Day may be celebrated one day of the year, but here on the Dyslexia Mom Life podcast, we are celebrating moms for the entire month of May. Today, I'm talking to one of the 8 amazing warrior moms who are sharing their personal parenting dyslexia journey with us. Grab your earbuds and enjoy learning from moms who are taking you behind the scenes of parenting dyslexic kiddos. All right, today on the show, I'm so excited to welcome Daniella Hauptmann. She is here for our special series for Mother's Day, and I'm just beyond delighted to share her family story with you today. But before we do, I want to welcome Daniella to the show. So welcome. We appreciate you being here.
I'm happy to be here.
Well, before we get started, do you mind just maybe sharing a little bit about yourself and your family before we get into your dyslexia parenting story, but just maybe give a little context about yourself so they can get to know you a little bit?
Sure. I am a married mom of 3 kids, ages 4, 8, and 11. My 11-year-old is the dyslexic one. I run a online eco-friendly toy shop called Purple Panda Company, and then I'm also in real estate. So I got a lot going on.
Absolutely. Like most moms, it seems like we have lots going on all the time.
Yeah.
But when you are running a household and running a business, and it sounds like you're running multiple businesses, it makes for a very busy day. Well, I have to say, we were talking before we hit record, and I absolutely love your Purple Panda company. The toys are amazing, but I also love just what you do around framing your brand. It is absolutely beautiful. So if anybody is in the market for children's toys, you should absolutely check it out, because it's an amazing website, and she has a lot of unique things to offer, just things that you don't see on the market. So that's very refreshing as well. So thank you for your work there as well. All right. So you have 3 children. Are they all girls? Do I remember that right?
They're all girls.
All girls. And so your 11-year-old is your amazing dyslexic, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's start there then. Let's talk a little bit about the early days, if we will. Like, what were some of the things that you look back now that you saw as signs of there's something more here, or maybe even an aha moment where you were like, you know what, something's not right, that there's something else going on here with these particular concerns that we're having. So talk to us early on about some of the signs or some of the things you were seeing early on before you get to the dyslexia identification.
I would say the very first thing that stands out is she couldn't learn her colors. So, we were going over her colors. She was 2 and she just kept getting them wrong. I'm like, okay, she's 2 and she's 3 and we're doing colors and she's still getting them wrong. And I'm like, well, she's 3. Okay. And then at 4, I was like, I think she's colorblind. Like, I remember telling my cousin, who is an assistant superintendent for a school district, I think she's colorblind. Like, can you check her out? Do you think she's colorblind? And she came over and did stuff and she was like, no, she's not colorblind. She knows her colors. I think she's just being stubborn. I'm like, okay. But that was really, and then looking back, once I knew, and then looking at some of the telltale signs, that's one of them, or can be one of them.
Right. So what about as she moves into kindergarten, what are you seeing there?
She just wasn't, she could not blend her words. We were doing the basic cat, sound out cat, k, at. And she knew the k, she knew the at, she knew the t. And I was like, put that together. What does that make? And she was like, I don't know. K, at, I don't know. She just
couldn't put them together. Yeah.
Yeah. Could not put it together. And I was just, I was very frustrated. I put her mistakenly into a charter school to start off kindergarten, which was
Mm-hmm.
touted as one of the best in our state. They teach ahead. It's very classical curriculum. A lot of homework. She had homework in kindergarten.
Oh.
It was flashcards, these Spalding phonogram cards that we had to go over every night. And she just wasn't learning them. I would go over a set of 10 or even 5. And the next night I'd be like, all right, she's got it. She's nailed it. No, she might know one of them. Meanwhile, my 3-year-old knows them. I would say, what's of her? And she would say, ER.
Yeah.
And my 5-year-old just looked at me like, I don't know, mommy.
So at that point in time, how was that going for you as a family? Was she starting to show signs of frustration or not wanting to go to school, or just completely, I just can't do this? Or what was going on at that time for her from more of a social emotional standpoint?
She liked going to school.
Mhm.
I mean, she did love her teachers and everything. So that wasn't an issue, but just the nightly homework was, she was in kindergarten half day, so she wasn't a full day, and they did do fun stuff. But just those, she had spelling words, and then she had a test every Friday, and trying to, get her.
That's so painful.
Yeah,
That is just so painful. Yeah.
And we had ocean on there.
Oh, you're like, okay. We are not going to get that one. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's frustrating at that point as a mom because, or for parents in general, really, whoever's caregiving, because at that point in time, you've not figured out yet why they can't do it. So,
Right.
Are we just playing around? You're not being serious, or is there something else going on?
And just lazy. Like I feel horrible. I remember saying, you're being lazy. Like,
right.
We would sit there, we would literally work on these things for an hour a night. And she would sit there and cry, and she would fidget, and she would, look all over. And I was like, pay attention, stop fidgeting. Why are you fidgeting? Just sit still and look at this card.
Right.
We just went over this. You should know this. And, this went on for most of the semester, the first semester. And I just kept talking to my cousin, who was the superintendent, and we just couldn't figure out like what was going on. I knew my husband was in reading classes when he was younger. I knew he was labeled with learning disability, and in those, at the time called LD classes. And so I knew he struggled with reading, but he did not have a dyslexia diagnosis. And I remember asking him, are you sure you didn't get a dyslexia diagnosis? He was like, no, I went through lots of testing. I was never told I was dyslexic. Mm-hmm. And I had been discussing that with my cousin, do you think she's dyslexic? And she was like, she could be. I talked to another friend who was a reading specialist, and she, it's just funny how many people don't know a whole lot about dyslexia. Even, experts in school don't know. And she was like, well, here's a list, look at these things. And I'm like, well, she can rhyme. She must not be dyslexic. She can rhyme, and she can count. She knows her numbers, and she can skip count and things like that. So I was like, she doesn't, she's a couple of these, but she doesn't have majority. So it must not be that.
Yeah. And at our house, our daughter has always been good at math. Like, we're fortunate for that. Math comes easily to her. And then I don't know if you experience this as well, but even like the other pieces, to me, dyslexia is so unique and so different because you have all these pieces and you have these little, I guess you could say, outliers that are going on with them where they, they're not putting those sounds together to make words. But then on the other hand, they're using this extensive vocabulary, or they're really creative, or, there's this other piece to them that you're like, it sounds horrible to say, I can't believe I want to say this out loud, but what we typically know growing up, well, she doesn't, because dyslexics don't appear to be special ed, right? They don't appear to have a difference or a disability. So
Right.
They look pretty normal, right? I mean, there's not a physical disability. So a lot of people say, well, it's like an invisible disability because no one really sees it. And I think for parents, it's even more, can't even say the word, perplexing, because you see this child that presents with all these amazing strengths and features. And then on the flip side, something that we think comes easily, but it really doesn't. And we really have to learn how to read. It's not something that we get naturally, right? I mean, it is a skill, and it just doesn't make sense for a while, and like you said, we were the same way early on with our daughter, and it was more sight words. And I was like, we've studied these all week. I don't like Thursday night in the floor crying, both of us. She's frustrated. I'm frustrated. I'm like, that doesn't even sound like these letters. Like, where are you getting this? So
Yeah.
it can be very frustrating. So it sounds like the first semester of kindergarten, there were some ups and downs and still trying to make sense out of all this.
It was painful. It was just so
Mhm.
painful. And, she did write, she reversed her BDs. I do remember her writing, she wrote something and I showed him, I was like, honey, look at this paper. I'm like, if you put a mirror up to it, it's a mirror image. You can read it in the mirror. It's totally backwards. I was like, that's when I really started saying, is she dyslexic? And people are like,
Right.
that's not the only sign. And I was
Right.
just like, this is weird. Like, I can't even do that. If I tried, I could not write like that.
Right.
Like,
And she's
how
doing it with, that's just how she's doing it. Yeah.
right. She didn't
So,
even think twice about it.
yeah. So as you go into second semester kindergarten, are you still seeing the same things? Are things getting better? Are the school
I
addressing
had talked
things
to
at
her
all? Or
teacher.
Mhm.
I was talking to her teacher about it. I was like, do you think she's dyslexic? And she's like, oh, I said, can we test her? There's something going on here. Can we please test her? And she said, no, it's too early to be testing for dyslexia. You don't do that. And this is what I had heard from other people as well, other experts in the school. You don't test for dyslexia, before like second grade or maybe even fourth grade, and it's too soon. And she had had a speech regression when she started kindergarten. She had no speech issues prior to kindergarten. And so, I was like hounding the school about getting her speech tested, and they were dragging their feet on that, and they wouldn't throw in dyslexia as long as they were doing speech. So they put her in a special reading program. She was going every day after school for help, and it was making zero difference. And then we hired a tutor from the school, and she went for the rest of the year, and it made no difference. Like, she barely had mastered her alphabet sounds by the end of the school year, by the end of kindergarten.
Wow. Yeah. Because they're addressing a different thing. They're not addressing the pieces that need to be addressed. And you're right. What you said earlier, which was, when you were mentioning, you know, this is just what the experts are saying or what the school is saying. And many times when we were just talking a few minutes ago, you said, it's interesting because many times people, and I was the same way. I just thought dyslexia was things were backwards, letters, numbers were backwards. I didn't realize there was a whole different layer to dyslexia. And like you were saying a few minutes ago, educators didn't realize that either. Like there's some very specific signs early on, as early as kindergarten, that if you know what you're watching for, you can absolutely catch it as early as possible. All right, so
Right.
let's talk about, did you go into first grade with the same situation? When do you have an aha moment to say, okay, we're going to pivot and do something different? This is not working.
Well, I knew by the end of first semester in kindergarten that I didn't, the school was not for her. In the meantime, my 3-year-old, I had just enrolled her in a Montessori. I wasn't familiar with Montessori until I enrolled her there. And I just knew when I toured it, it was like, I'm very crunchy, organic. And it just, I instantly meshed with this school. And as I learned more about Montessori and saw what she was doing, and I was going to the parent nights and learning what Montessori is, I was like, this is how my kindergartner learns. She needs this play-based learning, this hands-on learning where she doesn't realize that she's learning. And so, by the end of the year, I was like, we're not doing this charter school anymore. I'm pulling her and she's going to private. I'm just putting her in Montessori, and we're going to see how that goes. And then also, she had started getting speech therapy. And then the speech therapist was finally like, her speech, she still needs a little bit more work, but really her bigger concern is her reading, just having her try and do some words for her speech. She's really behind, I think you should switch over to that, to getting tutored for reading. So then we switched over to a reading tutor. And then she was like, after, I don't know, 6 months, she was like, really, she needs more help than I can give her. I think you should try this place called Blossom Park. I think they're going to give her more individualized learning that she needs for her tutoring. So we switched over to that. But she also flourished in Montessori.
Was that another tutoring program or was that a different school?
No, it wasn't a school. Yeah, it's an outside like they use, I think it's called Fit Learning. And so it's like another institution that you would go sign up for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very expensive. It was very expensive. It was like $90 an hour, and they want you to do 10-week sessions. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, in 10 weeks, she's going to know how to read. This is it. This is intense. 5 days a week,
right.
1 hour.
Oh, wow. That is intense.
Yeah. So I'm like, or maybe it's 4 days a week. this 10 weeks, this is going to be it. I'm going to record her then reading a book. Like, I really believed that, but that didn't happen.
So, at that point, was she in first grade at this point?
Yes, she was in first grade.
All right. So first grade, is this first semester, second semester?
When did she start there? I think she started Blossom. I think she started Blossom right before second grade started, like maybe the summer before second.
Okay. So you have these 10 weeks, this very structured program that you feel like, okay, this has got to be it, right? Because these other things, there was speech we addressed, we've got a reading tutor. They said, nope, we got to go a different direction. And so you're checking all the boxes and following all the advice. And what happens at the end of Blossom Park?
They give you testing. So
Okay.
that was the one thing. You had concrete tests to really
Okay.
measure the progress. And they do, it's multifaceted, multi-sensory. So it was in the direction that she needed. I did see improvement, but very slow, very small. And so we kept doing the 10 weeks and we kept doing the 10 weeks. And at the end of second, they said, and they said all along, we don't really care what her diagnosis is. We don't help according to diagnosis. We help according to the child and testing. But at the end, they were like, it's really slow. Maybe you do want to get her tested and see what's going on here.
You're like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, okay.
So that was the end of second grade that she was evaluated?
Yes. And so I was given the wrong information again, told I couldn't go through the public for the evaluation, went and got a neuropsychologist to evaluate her. And I remember sitting down with him and I was like, I think she might have dyslexia. I think she's dyslexic. And he said, he kind of laughed. He was like, we don't say dyslexia. That's not a term we use anymore. That's kind of old school back in the day. Now it's called specific learning disability. And I was like, okay. And so he tests her and we sit down to go over the results and he's, telling me what she's struggling in. And he gets into the meat of it. And he was like, oh, that poor thing, she's dyslexic.
And you're like, yes, I've been saying that since kindergarten or maybe before.
It still was kind of shocking, to hear.
Because it's like a relief, but then it's like overwhelm all at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. So how did you feel at that moment when he said, yes, oh my goodness, she's absolutely dyslexic? How did you feel at that moment?
It just kind of broke my heart,
Mm-hmm.
I just knew it was going to be a long road for her, even though I still didn't really understand what dyslexia was or what was needed. He just said, what you're doing, this program you have her in, this is really good. I put his kid wasn't dyslexic, but he's like, I put my kid in, it's very helpful. I think the path you're doing is right. You want to do multi-sensory approach for her. And he kind of listed off different things and he threw out Orton Gillingham. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the first time I had really heard that. And so I went home and kind of looked into it and started researching it. And I was like, oh, okay. And so she was getting that at Blossom for the most part, but it wasn't OG based.
Right.
And so, and it was just getting so expensive. We couldn't, between private school and paying for this, I was like, and
then too, if she's doing 4 days a week after school, I mean, it's not leaving her much time for anything else between that and homework. Right. Yeah. Yes. That's the other thing that happens to our dyslexic kiddos is they get, because there is usually other things like speech or like you said, OT, or it could be, ADHD. I mean, there's just other things that go along with dyslexia. And, just the remediation part is exhausting for them after they've been at school all day. And then there's homework. And so, so I could see after a couple of 10-week cycles that was, you were hoping for her anyway, to see a lot more progress for her so she could get.
Right. Catch up. And they kept showing me where she was with her reading. I think by that point she was by the end of second, I think she was at the beginning of a first grade reading level. The one good thing is because she is in Montessori, there is no homework. So she did have.
And they're also not grade levels and easily grouped by grade ages. And so she's not standing out like she might I don't say standing out, but in a traditional school, it may be more apparent. But when there's different levels and different grades and not really grades, but different ages of kids grouped together.
She was in first through sixth grade grouped together in one classroom of like 30 kids with 2 teachers and an assistant. So, but it really was good for her because she never did feel behind because there was
Right.
always kids
And it
at her
was
level.
right. And there was so much hands on there.
Right. There was so
Yeah.
much hands-on, and her teachers were going through getting certified in Barton.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to ask you that piece. It's kind of a side discussion, but I have had people tell me mixed things about Montessori as it relates to remediating a dyslexic child and whether or not that's a good pathway. But it's interesting that where you were at, that they were actually going to school to be trained as well. So that's a huge benefit. Did you find? I know we're not dealing with your journey, but did you find anywhere along your journey that Montessori um, posed any concerns or conflicts with what you needed to do for OG?
No, not really, because
Mhm.
it gave her everything she needed. Like, she is very hands-on with her learning. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not. Like, I learning comes very easy to me. I can hear it and memorize it very quickly.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't need that hands-on. Like,
Right.
her approach when I sit in, once a week we would go and sit in, parents could come and see what they're doing, and she would show me like how they were doing division with test tubes and beads in second grade. And I was like, I have
Wow.
no idea what you're doing, but I'm glad that you understand.
Exactly. As long as you're understanding it. Yeah, we're used to pencil on paper kind of thing. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
interesting. My daughter's in fourth grade and she brings home these ways that they're doing math now. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, how did you get that answer again? She's like,
right.
well, you take the turtle something, the turtle, I don't know. She's got terms for everything, which it makes sense to her though. I mean, she can just spout off stuff. I'm like, well, as long as it makes sense. And you're right, for some kiddos, it makes better sense for them to have more of those manipulatives and those hands-on, and that's the beauty of Montessori, because she was able to explore and figure out for herself how she best learns, and then she's
Right.
able to apply that is what I've always seen or thought of as a benefit to Montessori. But is that structured literacy piece? I think that some people have said, you don't really get that in Montessori because it's kind of different. It's just a
Right.
different type of teaching. So once you realize that there's really an Orton Gillingham component for kids that are really successful dyslexics, especially as they go into adulthood, did you pivot or change what you were doing for tutoring at that point, or what did you do going forward once you got
I
your
did.
dyslexia diagnosis? You now realize there's a whole world of Orton Gillingham and information overload. So what's your next step?
Well, I had heard that Arizona has something called ESA, an empowerment scholarship for kids with disabilities, where you can get scholarships to pay or help pay for their private schooling or for their therapies, whatever. So I started looking into that. And in order to apply for it, I was told that I had to have an evaluation from the public school district. They would not take my private $1,200
Right.
neuropsych
Mm-hmm.
evaluation. I was like, you got to be kidding me, because this is the route I wanted to go the first place. So I had to go to the school district and have her get tested by their neuropsych. What she did was she just took our evaluation basically and regurgitated it. And that's what I could use to apply for ESA. But talking to her, she told me about a tutor who I had heard about from other friends who were using her. She used to work for the school and she left to do privately. She became a Barton certified tutor. And so I got her number and reached out to her. And so that's who my daughter has been seeing now for the last going on 2 years.
Okay. And so since that change has occurred 2 years ago, and now you're on a different path because you have your you're at a place where you actually have some additional knowledge that helps what path you need to kind of be looking down, and it just, to me, more knowledge that we have about what's going on, especially with our kids, it really helps kind of figure out what is the next step, and then what is the next step. And so at that point, you found a certified Barton tutor. She's been with that tutor for a few years now. What are you seeing now? Like, what is the difference that you're seeing now? What kind of gains, or have there been any gains over this last 2 years?
I mean, yeah, huge gains. And it's hard to say because at Blossom, I think she got all of the building blocks that she needed to be on
Right.
the cusp of to actually be reading well, but she wasn't there yet. And then when she
Hmm.
switched over her Barton tutor, I think that really just helped connect
Connect
it
it.
all.
Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
she really did start reading well. I
Hmm.
mean, she was still reading slow. She still reads slow. She still mixes her words up and things like that, but
Hmm.
she's reading.
Hmm.
She can
And how
read.
often, like you said, she's been doing that for 2 years. How often does she go to tutoring?
I try for 4 times a week, but depending on the tutor schedule, sometimes it's 2 to 3.
Okay. And is that an hour or is that
Yeah,
45
that's an
minutes or is
hour,
it
and she
1
comes
hour?
to her school, so it's not after
Oh,
school.
that's nice. Okay.
So that's really great. They come in the afternoons when all the academic part of Montessori has been done in the morning, so she's
Mm-hmm.
not missing out on, important curriculum, and she loves not having to do it after school.
Oh, that's fantastic. And were you able to get some scholarships through the school system or through the state?
No, because I found out she was gonna have to go to public school for 100 days in order to
Yeah.
qualify,
That's
and
how it
then
is in Georgia too. They have to
is it?
attend. Yeah, you have to have an IEP, and then you have to have had it for so long. You've been
Yes,
counted for so many attendance cycles there, and
yeah,
so we were in a similar situation. We had speech therapy, and we went to a private school just because the classes were so much smaller, and she was having a lot of articulation problems in pre-K. And then we just said, "Oh, we'll just keep her there in kindergarten because it was small and they knew her." And same kind of thing. Once we realized we did get her tested through the public school, but mainly because I worked there. So I kind of knew the back channels, if you will, to get that done. But even then, I knew at that point I couldn't transition her to a public school. Like she was going to need to stay in a private school. And so I do think I wish that was something, and I'm hoping that and praying that's something that will change in the States because, at the end of the day, if the school district can't provide the services that we need, and so we have to go either to a private tutor or we've got to go to like my daughter's in a school for dyslexia. There's several here
oh,
in
wow,
Atlanta. They're
that makes
pricey,
right,
but every kid in the building is dyslexic. Every teacher's OG trained. I mean, it's night and day, right? But I do believe there should be some, so I'll get off my soapbox in a second, but there should be some state scholarships that our kids should be able to be awarded without having to attend public school where
yeah,
they're in a pull-out program with kids with all types of learning differences. And so the teacher, it's very difficult to find a teacher in a public school that's OG trained, that's only,
yeah,
instructing OG, OG
right,
for those kids. And so, and there's still, I talked to a mom the other day and she's like, my daughter's school district, they say there's 3 dyslexics in the whole district and she's one of them. And then we were like, well, we
right,
know that's not true. So, I mean, as long as we are still living in that land, it is so hard as moms. And there's so many, what I like to call that invisible parenting. There's so many pieces that our kids are having to go through that most people don't see, just like you were sharing with, the tutoring. It's so, let's talk about that. So since the tutoring is built into the end of her school day, is she now able to do some things outside of her day as far as interest or things that she likes doing?
oh, yeah. Yeah, so she does after school clubs, chess club, she takes piano lessons,
Mm,
she's done different music classes. I mean, yeah, it's
yeah. And can
definitely
you
much.
tell a difference in her besides the reading? I mean, like you said, I know for some moms, especially early in the journey, it does once you know that your child's dyslexic, then and you start reading and listening and following different groups, it is a bit overwhelming. It is. And we know that these academic years are going to be so hard, but we also know that they really are going to do amazing things because they're amazing little thinkers. They just think completely different. But at the end of the day, when we think about all of those pieces together, I love to hear stories where the kids are really, finding their thing, right? Finding their strength, their passion, and they're finding time for that. And so that's so fortunate that you're able to have the tutor come to school because sometimes that's not the case. That's one of the reasons we moved to the school we moved to. We moved across Atlanta. Long story, sold house, moved jobs, like the whole 9 yards. Because I wanted her to be able to have some. We're in first grade going to second grade at this point. We wanted her to have some type of childhood, right? Where it's not like you were saying, it's so hard when every day after school you're having to go somewhere. It's hard on the family and it's hard on the kiddos. And luckily for her too, it sounds like with the school that you've been able to get her into with the Montessori school, you know, I'm all about homework if it's something to reinforce, but I'm not about busy work. And
Right,
so if you're going to send busy work home, yeah, that's not that, and I'm a former educator. I guess I'll always be an educator. My husband's an educator. We have a family full of educators. So education's there. We still didn't know about dyslexia though. That was still a big unknown to us. So we've done a lot of research and learned a lot. But I'll say all that to say, I'm so glad, and I know you are too, that she's able to find outlets, that she's able to do things um, now that tutoring's built into her school day. So that's amazing that you're able
yes.
to do that.
takes art class. That's her biggest thing is,
Oh, I love that.
because of COVID, they haven't had the art teacher at the school. So the art teacher's
Hmm.
been coming to our house and doing weekly art classes with her. And
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
she's so amazing. And then something else I should mention, it's coming up is, she attends a dyslexia summer camp.
Oh, okay. All
So
right.
that
Yeah.
was also, I think, really kind of a game changer. We started doing that. This would have been her third summer. Last summer it was canceled because of COVID, but
Hmm.
it's in Colorado. And
Okay.
so we go to Colorado. It's in Evergreen, just outside Denver.
Okay. Which one is that? I've looked at several summer camps.
It's Rocky Mountain.
Rocky Mountain. Okay. But and the reason I asked that is by the time this airs, they would have already heard all this. But in the month of April, I'm doing all kinds of summer camps. I've interviewed people at a couple different camps and different programming. And so this is a perfect segue. I'm so glad you're talking
Ah,
about that. Okay. So when you think about summer opportunities, you said that she goes to summer camps or has had the benefit of doing that prior to COVID. What do you see as some of the benefits that you've seen as a family with her being able to attend that summer camp in Colorado?
just her, her overall confidence. I feel like it's 5 or 6 weeks, and they go every day, 5 days a week from 8 to 5, and from 8 to about 1, it's all academics, and then they have lunch, and then the afternoon is all activities. They go mountain climbing, horseback riding, all sorts of kayaking, fun stuff, ninja camps. So it's very intense, and I feel like they pack in a year's worth of tutoring into these 5 or 6 weeks that she's in camp. And so they cover handwriting and proper sentence analysis and, writing paragraphs, and they have to give a presentation at the end of camp, and they have to write it all out and then present it to the entire camp and parents. And she just has a lot more confidence, and she's also around all the other children are dyslexic. So
Right.
that's really
Absolutely.
great for her
So do
too.
y'all go there and stay, or does she stay, or do y'all go up there as a family?
We do, yeah. So, I can work from home. My
Hmm.
husband can work from home. So in the summers he does, and then my in-laws rent a house, and we all stay together in the house because that's a big expense. Having
Yeah.
some people take their campers up there. Some people
Okay.
rent a
Neat.
room. Like people get pretty
Yeah.
creative with what they can do. And then the camp does offer a scholarship that we applied for the first summer and we got. So that paid for half of the camp. And so, yeah, we love it. It's a great escape from the Arizona summers. We're not here for the 120-degree days. We're hiking
Bet.
the mountains. So
That
it's
sounds great.
fantastic. And our other kids love it too.
That sounds great. Well, let's talk about for a minute. I have a couple other just quick follow-up questions for you. So it sounds like that your oldest daughter is finally in a position where she is, really starting to find, um, some success and really starting to thrive in those areas and now starting to feel more secure because she's getting what she needs through the summer and then through the private tutoring at the school. And then she's in this amazing daily school environment that's supportive for how she learns. And so it sounds like there's amazing things going on, but I know that she's not your only, right? So you're a mom of three. And so let me ask you a question. I know for some, it's kind of hard sometimes to think about, but, when you think about parenting, and parenting to me in general right now is so difficult because it's so different than when we were growing up, just, not to mention a pandemic, but with social media, and there's just so many pieces that just look different. But when you think about parenting a child with dyslexia, what are some of the things that you would share with a mom who's new to this journey? What are you seeing as some of the most rewarding things or things that you're learning that you probably wouldn't have had you not had this opportunity to parent a child with dyslexia? Because I really do think we are selected for them. Like we are paired up from them from day one, obviously. And so we have been chosen to parent these amazing little kids. But and not, I know every child's different, so it's hard to compare, one to the other, but there are some unique pieces to parenting a child with dyslexia. A lot of those are kind of invisible to the outside world, but what are some things you would want to say to her, some of the most rewarding things that she's going to see?
Just their perseverance when they're not, when they have an outlet that really helps them flourish and learn. Just seeing how much they grow when they're given the right circumstances to learn. That's such a game changer. Once you figure out what works for them and then you follow through with that, their confidence, just everything soars there. And then, their other talents come out too, because then they're not so inhibited, I feel like.
Right, absolutely. So on the flip side of that, if we were to flip the coin to the other side, what do you think are some of the most challenging things that a mom may experience raising a child with dyslexia?
Oh, just how they learn and they think differently. That has been the hardest thing for me because, like I said, school came easy to me. I could study an hour before a test and ace it, and that is not not the case for her. So just having patience, and then just even executive functioning is so different. Her disorganization and having to constantly remind her to do things, not getting frustrated once you understand that that's oftentimes comes with being dyslexic. Learning what to do. My husband figured out by attend because of the summer camp she goes to, they had all the parents do a simulation for dyslexia, and he was like, wow, I'm dyslexic. And so that's been a big
Right.
realization for him, and things that he's had to do, what he's learned with sticky notes to
Yeah.
remind himself to keep things organized. Just kind of helping her figure out how to become more organized and stay on top of things and not get angry at her and yell at her because she's not doing those things.
Yeah, that is a challenge, and just learning patience that is very different than what you might would have had to done. And then too, I think, like you were saying with the challenges, I don't know if challenge is the right word, but I do think it's a different family dynamics, especially um, when we as parents start going, oh, well, I do that. Or your spouse starts saying, oh, like my husband's like, okay, I'm completely dysgraphic. Like I've got to have dysgraphia. And so he just knows that. Right. But but as we were learning with her and learning more about dyslexia and the other, diagnoses that go along with dyslexia, that then you start dealing with another dimension, and so those things are not always on your radar as well. So all right, let's talk about something that I love to talk about. This is one of my kind of passion projects that I love to talk about, which is, as moms, I've already talked about many times about just all this invisible parenting that we do that people don't see around us, and just how it can really be exhausting. It can really wear on us. And I only have one. So you have three kiddos. So I can only imagine and then you run multiple businesses. So I know you're a busy lady, but what do you do for self-care? Because for most of us, we put ourselves on the back burner until we are trying to get something out of that cup, and it is completely empty. And so I am working on that myself. It is a work in progress, I will say, but I'm always fascinated to hear from people what they do for self-care. And many people have said, well, let me tell you before pandemic and then what I do now. So whatever you want to share, but I think it's helpful, especially at the beginning of the throes of dyslexia. You're so overwhelmed. You've forgotten how to take care of yourself. So do you mind sharing some of the things that you enjoy doing for your own self-care?
Well, something I just recently started was walking early in the morning. I get up at 6 now and I walk until about 7:30 and come back and finish getting the kids ready for school. And I've only been doing this 7 days in a row, but I want to make this a habit now because I was not making time for exercise with everything else that was going on. And so I can listen to my podcasts now. I wasn't able to do those things, and that's something that I really enjoy. Or I can bring a friend with and catch up with a friend on the walk. So
Mm-hmm.
that's been good.
Yeah, I love that too. And I can tell I'm still working from home. My day job, so to speak, is we're still 100% telework. And so I will find that there are days when I'm like, oh, I haven't been outside today. And I can tell a difference in how I feel. But if I can go outside and just, even if it's a 30-minute walk, I try to walk about an hour, but even if it's 30 minutes, it just feels good. I'm able to breathe in some fresh air. I'm able just to get a different perspective. And so I love that piece, just being able to get outside and enjoy that. It really does make a difference, not only physically, but emotionally, I think, as
Yeah.
well. So, all right. So, my last question for you is this. So, if you were going to give advice to a mom who is starting her journey, maybe she's either just figuring out something's not working, and maybe she's not quite to the dyslexia identification, or maybe she just found out within the last few weeks or few months, and she's just feeling all the things, right? She feels alone. She feels overwhelmed. She feels like, I don't know if I can do this. What is some advice that you would want to give to her? She's called you on the phone and she's like, Daniela, I don't know what to do. What would you tell her?
I actually have gotten this call from sharing my story on Facebook. I've had several people reach out to me, and it's just knowing who the true experts are on this and who aren't. Just because someone is a teacher, a principal, whatever, administrator, doesn't mean that they have all of the answers. And so just because someone gives you an answer, don't take that at face value. Keep searching and digging and looking at all of the different options and testing. And, you're your child's biggest advocate. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're so right there on just, I think sometimes it's almost intimidating because we just think, well, the teachers will know, and
Right.
they don't do it maliciously. They just
No.
know what they know, and like you said, we had some amazing teachers, and they're like, I just can't put my finger on it. And so I think you're right there as far as, we just have to go with our own intuition like you did and just keep digging. All right. Just keep digging and asking those questions. So I think that's great advice. Thank you for that. So I want to be the first person, because we're recording this in like the last week of March, to say Happy Mother's Day early.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much for being on the show. And so I so appreciate you sharing your story. It really does make a difference. And I know many people are going to appreciate you sharing. And I just thank you so much for all that you're doing. I'm definitely going to put a link to your Purple Panda Company in the show notes. Y'all are doing some amazing things there. And so I definitely want to connect people with that if they want to check that out, because you do have some amazing things on there. Some of the things I'm like, oh, I wish my daughter was a little younger. I would love to buy that.
It's all the toys. Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, toys are always good. So, but yeah, y'all have some really unique pieces that I just think are amazing. So, but I do appreciate you, and I hope that you have a fantastic Mother's Day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening today, and happy Mother's Day to you. You are an amazing warrior mom, and together we can do hard things, right? Are you new to dyslexia? If you are and you're looking for more resources, then go to dyslexiamomlife.com/start here, where I have resources for you from blog articles, other podcast episodes you can listen to, and also free resources. And do you want to connect with our guest this month? Then be sure to go to dyslexiamomlife.com to find each of the episodes listed there from this month, so you can connect with all these amazing moms on our podcast. And we have a special episode that we're going to be releasing on May 31st, so you don't want to miss that. Be sure to subscribe, though, because we are going to be releasing these Mother's Day episodes throughout the month of May. Have a great day, and remember, you got this.